And welcome back, Councillor Hicks. I see you got your orange juice.
All right, we're good to go.
Okay, we're back in open session, and the items for the reason why we went in camera were only discussed, and only those items were discussed from the purpose of going in camera. So now we're back to the resolution, or to the bylaw that was moved by Councillor Potter and Councillor Millen with regards to bylaw 508220. There was a request to go in camera to discuss some legal matters, and we did that. We've come out of in camera now, and we're in open session. Are there any other questions with regards to the bylaw?
So, Mr. Warden, Councillor Keaveney had a question prior to going into closed session. I don't know if she would like that answered now. Thank
you for that, Madam Clerk. Councillor Keaveney.
Thank you, Mr. Warden and County Clerk. Yeah, I was just curious if there was any knowledge on staff's behalf in relation to Mr. White's comment about donation of property from Sutherland's.
Right. Who would I go? Maybe Madam CEO and then our solicitor. Madam CEO, do you have a comment there? Or
I think, first of all, if you scrolled through the information that Mr. White provided, you would have seen at the very end of that chain of emails, there was a map provided, and that shows you where the property was in case you hadn't got right to there. You would see that was the property in question. There is quite an extensive planning process that would need to be undertaken, and I will let Randy Schertzer speak to that.
Are we able to pull that map up for council just to make sure they saw that, just for information? I know I saw it, and it seemed to be east of the subject property. And I'll go to Randy, and I'm not sure if you're able to pull up just so everybody knows where that location was. Randy, are you there?
I am here. Are you able to pull that up, Heather, or do you want me to do it, to try to do it on my end?
You have to share your screen.
Yeah, whoever has it open can share their screen.
Okay.
I don't have it open right up in front of me at the moment, but I can see if I can find it.
I think it's important just so everybody knows where that was, just for information. So if you didn't quite, I know you had to scroll down quite a piece, Madam CEO, but it was at the very bottom.
Sorry, I didn't have it up open. So. Okay. There it is. Thanks.
Yeah. Go ahead, Randy.
Okay. So, staff have done obviously an extensive review of the property that's shown there in terms of lands for discussion. And prior to this morning, we weren't sure in terms of what was being potentially offered. And as Councillor heard, the offer would be to donate that portion of lands. As Kim indicated, it would be because the lands are outside of the settlement area of Durham. It requires a pretty extensive process in order to bring those lands into a settlement area designation. Things like a comprehensive review that you may be familiar with in going through that in your own communities would be required in order to justify that those lands are required to be added to the area. And part of that is obviously look at, do we have enough land already in the settlement area of Durham to be able to develop, to move forward with development? And if not, then maybe you could look at adding in additional lands to the settlement area. It would trigger a county official plan amendment, a West Gray official plan amendment, and a zoning amendment. The lands are currently designated as rural in the county plan. They are zoned as A3 or restricted rural in the West Gray zoning bylaw. So again, they would require official plan amendments and zoning amendments to bring them in, as opposed to lands that the county would be potentially acquiring from DSPI. Those lands are already designated. They're already in the primary settlement area of Durham in the county official plan. They are designated as residential in the West Gray official plan and zoned as residential. As noted in my previous staff report, obviously there's studies that would still be required in order to develop the lands that we'd be acquiring from DSPI. But the other lands, as I mentioned, would require the lands being offered by Walkers would be a much greater process that you'd have to go through in order to bring those lands in to get the proper designation and zoning in order to proceed with the development.
So just before you finish, Randy, time frame on that roughly, just roughly, I'm not trying to nail you down, but just process in your general normal in a normal sense.
Yeah, so with comprehensive review, that triggers a county official plan amendment, West Gray official plan amendment, and zoning. You're probably looking at minimum 6 months, probably to closer to 12 months in total. So probably 6 months to 12 months just to go through that process. And again, there would be no guarantees that we could justify the need to add the lands, right? So because at this point in time, we're identifying that there's at least sufficient lands in order to develop, we're hoping to develop, with being the long-term care facility in Durham.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there questions on that particular, or I'll go back to Councillor Keaveney. Do you have any follow-up on that? And then I'll go to other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. No, I'm comfortable.
Are there any other questions to that point that was raised that Randy presented to, from that sketch there or conversation? Any comments there? I see none, Madam Clerk. Is that correct?
That's correct. I see nothing here either.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much for that. And thank you, Randy, for that explanation on that. And thanks for bringing that forward. Are there any other questions with regards to this bylaw that is on the virtual floor? Okay. I guess I can go through the same process as, are there any opposed as we go through that? And then we'll go from there. And if there's any other part of voting, then we'll follow through on that. So the motion is on the floor, moved by Councillor Potter, second by Councillor Millen. Any opposed to this motion? Is there any opposed? Madam Clerk, is there any opposed there?
No hands raised, no, nothing in the comments, sir.
Okay, so that motion for that bylaw is carried. Okay, then moving forward, I have one more motion for this agenda, and it was moved by Council O'Leary and Council Robinson to adjourn our council portion of today's meeting on April 23rd. Any opposed to that motion? Okay, that motion is carried. So we have adjourned our regular council meeting at, I'm going to say at 10:45, Madam Clerk? Or thereabouts? 10:46? Okay. All right. So just take a few seconds here to move into our committee of the whole. Moving into the committee of the whole, I'll call this meeting to order for our committee of the whole meeting of April 23rd. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest with regards to the council members today? With regards to that agenda? Okay. There's no mention of anybody there. Determination of items requiring separate discussion. We have a consent agenda, and I do have a mover, Councillor Robinson and Councillor Hicks. Are any of those two items wish to be pulled for separate discussion? Is there any of those? And that's with regards to the purchasing report and also with regards to the Beaver Valley Village subdivision. Does anybody wish to pull those?
I see
right.
Councillor Millen has his hand up.
Just a
Okay,
quick
I can't see on my
question,
screen.
Mr.
Go
Ward.
ahead, Councillor Millen.
Just a quick question. Where is Finch Auto?
Sorry?
Where is Finch Auto?
Where is Finch Auto? That's where the pickups were purchased from. I'm just wondering, where is that?
London. I understand London.
So we didn't buy them from a local dealer. Okay.
Okay. All right, I allowed that. So generally you have to pull it to have that discussion. Okay, so I see there's none to be pulled. Again, that was moved by Councilor Robinson, Councilor Hicks. All, any opposed to that motion? Okay, that's carried. So moving on to item 5, and this is with regards to items for direction and discussion. And the first one is we have a report from our economic development team, and I have a mover and a seconder. This is for Savannah Myers' report. I have moved by Councilor Carlton and Councilor Robinson to put that on the virtual floor. And Savannah, do you wish to speak to your report?
Sure, if I could, that would be great.
Welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I think so.
Perfect. Okay. Apologies if you hear a little one in the background. She's having a good day. Okay, we wanted to put together a report on the business impact of COVID so that council could be aware of what we're seeing right across Grey County, knowing that this is definitely not unique to us. It is happening regionally and right around the world. And businesses are being hit very hard through this pandemic. What makes it so unprecedented is that it's unlike anything that we've seen before. It's not like a recession where things slow down. It is just completely stopped for most businesses. So we've been working hard as a regional team, and we wanted to bring some of that information forward to you. We started off just with a business overview because we also wanted to reinforce why this is so important and why it worries us so much in Grey County and in rural communities specifically. We hear quite often that this is going to hurt our small businesses the most because those supports just aren't quite there for them yet. And when we look at our business population, we've got just over 10,000 businesses, but 70% of those businesses in Grey County are either sole proprietors or home-based business. So that's why this is such a big deal for us here locally. If we look at those 10,000 businesses too, about 13% of them are in the tourism industry. So it's a significant impact. And altogether, the majority of people who are not a sole proprietor or a home-based business have less than 19 employees. So these are small businesses. So every time you hear us talk about SMEs, we really truly are. We're small and medium-sized businesses here in Grey County, which is part of why we're so quick and nimble, but also part of why this is going to impact so much greater locally. We provided the survey results from the very first business impact survey for you. So you have at the very end of the report, there is a link to bring you to those along with some of the narrative results as well, because we really think it's important to get the information out there. It's not good information, but it's important that we know it and everybody can see it and share the same information. So from that first survey, there were 318 businesses that completed it, and all 9 municipalities were represented those results. And 80% were telling us that the impact is significant and growing fast, which is different from what we see right across Western Ontario Wardens Caucus. We did organize this survey with the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus so that we have that greater regional data. And the second survey that we just launched last week is also with the Western Ontario Wardens. So we can continue that information gathering regionally and locally. It is no surprise that what businesses are looking for right now is that immediate financial assistance and the aids. And for really their employees, I have to say, we have always been so impressed with our business community and how much they care for their people. And this is absolutely no different. It is more apparent now than ever before how much our employers care for their employees and want to make sure that they are okay through this. So it is really heartwarming to reinforce that that is very much a common thread through all of our results, and we don't see that changing. So thank you to our businesses, because I mean, our people matter and they're reinforcing that every day. For municipal governments, they're looking for tax relief and deferrals, which I know we talked about 2 weeks ago, and Kevin will be talking more about that today. And many of your municipalities have already taken that step. Financial support, grants, anything but a loan is what we keep hearing. And we're working hard to continue the work on the community improvement plans that we were already doing previously to make sure that those are in place and ready to go, because we do think that they're going to be more important coming out of this than they were before. And the communication and marketing piece, that has also been absolutely key. We included the tourism specific impact as well, because tourism through their organizations, through RTO7 and TIO and TIAC, were really quick to get out of the gate with surveys. They are just launched their fourth survey this week. So they've been doing a really good job to keep the information flowing. And we provided those survey results from Grey Bruce Simcoe specifically because we thought that was also important for you to see, where 59% of the businesses are saying that they are closed temporarily. And we don't know what that's going to look like going forward, but that is the state of affairs on the tourism side. Also wanted to reinforce, because we know there's so much conversation about task forces for business and economic development right now all around us, that our approach to economic development through Grey County has been very much kind of in that same mode, just not actually called a task force. So we've had our economic development working group together since 2015. And it has representatives from all 9 of your municipalities, either your EDO, or if you don't have an EDO, it's your CAO that sits on it. We have all of our economic development and planning staff from Grey County participating, and we now have tourism as well, amalgamated department. Provincial representatives from Ministry of Agriculture, Food, Rural Affairs, and Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade have been a part of that group. And now RTO7 is also a part of that group. And then community partners, so we have both CFDC organizations, which is the federal loan organizations from Bruce and from Saugeen, 4 County Labor Market Planning Board, Georgian College, and then both business enterprise centers, ours and South Georgian Bay as well, to make sure that we do have that broad group and that broad expertise together. And we work very well together. So we've been quick and nimble to make some moves, and everything that we've done so far has been done with that group. So I do want to reinforce just how amazing your staff are locally, because we can't do this without them. We need to hear what's happening on the ground, and they have that first and ready access to talking to your businesses because they know them. And that has been really important to help us keep our messaging and all of our priorities consistent, so that we are going out to businesses with one firm message from all of us. And that also reinforces that, you know, we don't want to mess around with any of our resources. We know that they are limited right now, and we want to make sure that we are putting them together to make the greatest impact for our business community. So some of the actions that we've taken to date based on the survey information that has come, as well as our COVID business resource page. I don't know if you've taken a look at it, but if you haven't, please do. It's updated almost daily at this point because the information is changing so quickly. The provincial and federal programs that are coming out, they are still being changed on a daily, it seems, because we're all trying to figure out what this looks like. So I would really recommend taking a look at that. And that's where all of our surveys are housed. So that's where the very first survey was. The second survey currently is there. And based on the results, because we're watching the survey results come, we're trying to make changes as they're coming in instead of waiting until the very end. So that is why that page has changed so often, is because of the feedback we're finding from our business community. And also why we launched the Business and Community Resiliency Map. And I would really like to acknowledge Joel and IT and Philly and Jacinda for putting their brains together. This map was turned around in 24 hours based on what our businesses were telling us they needed. To date, we've got 435 businesses listed, plus 21 free Wi-Fi zones, because we've also heard that that has been an issue for people trying to access these government programs who don't have great internet, trying to find the Wi-Fi. So that is now also available on our listings. We've had 7,800 views, which is equating to 260 unique views a day. So the numbers are really good. And what's even more is that we've been able to take a leadership position in this, and Joel offered the template available to any other municipality looking for it. So it is being picked up right across from our neighbors in Bruce County. They've picked it up right through Western Ontario Wardens Caucus. They're all looking to use our same template, because why not R&D a little bit? If we can help our neighbors out, we're going to do that. And Philly said that she's been getting calls right out to the East Coast about our map. So I'm really, really impressed with how amazingly quick we were able to move and to get such a useful resource up there, not only for us and our business community, but also for our neighbors and our municipalities around us. We are also doing business consultations. So we have launched a formal call-in option we're always available. All of our staff are always available by call, but I think sometimes, especially in a situation like this, it's nice to reinforce that, yes, we are here. Here's an official call in line if you're looking for further information, or just an ear, because sometimes that is what businesses also need right now. So that is up and happening. And it's been about a call a day, but we only launched it last week. So we haven't done a lot of promotion around it yet. So that is next to come. In terms of tourism specific actions, we're meeting regularly, a weekly basis with RTO 7 and our neighboring municipalities, because we really do think that it's important as we do start to think about recovery, making sure that we're doing it regionally, especially in the tourism front. So those conversations are happening regularly. We have been very quiet on the consumer front for communications because we want to keep things quiet, and we don't want to entice anybody to break those public health asks. So we're trying to keep it quiet, but we are certainly planning behind the scenes about what that's going to look like as we move forward for recovery. Talking to Philly, the agri-food supports have been very good. She is finding that a lot of our businesses are turning to the larger groups like OFA to assist them in this, but she's absolutely keeping an ear and an eye and in regular communication with our folks locally. Also want to note that our 3 industries came together, and it is really nice to see. So our Economic Development Council of Ontario, which is EDCO, and then the Tourism Association of Ontario, TIO, and the Downtown Business Improvement Association, which is OBIA, they have all partnered to look at this right across Ontario, and we're helping to feed that information that we're collecting locally up so that they can also get those regional results to the federal and provincial ministries. So they've already provided a letter talking about commercial rent relief, interest relief on debt, and financial, not debt deferral. So those things, we are seeing the same information gathered here. We're pushing that up, and that has now gone to the federal and provincial ministries. And the last part of the report is just talking about assumptions and recovery. And we know that this will not be survivable for most businesses because we are small and medium-sized businesses. Some businesses are going to choose to close and not reopen, where others may have no option. It is just going to be their only option is to close. But we're really impressed with what the federal and provincial ministries are doing and trying to provide that liquidity to our business community to keep them afloat through this. Most of the initiatives that we had brought to you during budget and planning are likely not going to be needed anymore because we are in a completely new situation. So that's going to be part of our recovery planning when we do work with our working group. What do these new programs need to look like? Where do we need to pivot our plans in order to actually serve the business community now and going into the future, because they're going to need us even more when we do come to the other side of this. So right now, we do think that it's still too early to plan for recovery. We are thinking about everything we possibly can in the background, but until we know more of the situation and we get to that worst point of the situation, come out the other side, we don't want to put resources or attention into something that is going to need to be changed anyways to be nimble and flexible. So we are taking our time, but having those twice a week conversations with our working group, talking about what will this look like, how are we going to do it, and making sure that we are doing it all together so that all of our resources can be pooled, all of our brain power can be pooled, and we'll do this locally in Grey County, but also with our neighbors, with Western Ontario Wardens Caucus, with the province and the federal ministries as well, because it's really important to see what all levels are going to be able to do to streamline this process. So we outlined a couple of different tools for recovery that we're already starting to think about in terms of those business consultations and mentorship supports, the community improvement plans and the incentives available through that in the form of grants, retaining vacancy rebates for businesses who are now going to experience a higher vacancy as a result of permanent business closures, in addition to those penalty and interest and payment due date deferrals to alleviate those the cash flow concerns right now. Thinking about shovel-ready projects, because that is going to be an excellent way to help kickstart the economy when we are back up and going. And then the marketing component as well. Everything, all of our messaging right now is being kept in-house by staff, by the emergency communications team that's been put together with multiple departments, because we think it's really important to keep this information close and to have it all coming in from our internal organization. But we will continue to, I think we'll continue to keep that group together even as we're coming out of this in recovery, because they've been an excellent source for our team. And though this is not exhaustive, we will be back to you with another report in the coming months with more ideas once our working groups had an opportunity to really kind of put pen to paper. We just wanted to let you know it is coming, and we're not quite there yet, but we are thinking about recovery. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I know that's a lot of information to throw at you, but we thought the more you have, the better.
Well, thank you very much, Savannah, for the lengthy but important report. And I want to make sure that you pass it on for your team and everyone from the lower tiers that are working hard on this. And I know that when we come out of this, it's going to maybe be 2 years of moving forward with the new reality and where we land. But it will certainly be important that we start to, when things start to open up again, that we're there to support as best we can. And thank you for that. Any questions to this report to Savannah from County
Yes.
Council?
Councillor Desai has a question.
Go ahead, Councillor Desai. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Great report, Savannah. Reading through it, I'm a numbers guy, so I really enjoyed that. My one question, and through my family business, I did respond to the survey, but the timelines for me are a little bit hazy. The one question that I have is with regards to the figure that 65% businesses said that taxes be waived, and it's along those lines. It's on page 3 of the report. My question, Mr. Warden, through you to Savannah, is was this before or after the various schemes that were brought out by the various levels of government? One of them, of course, was the CEBA, KEBA, whatever we want to call it. It's a $40,000, which is interest-free up to December 31, 2022, and there's the ability to have $10,000 waived. So and then as well, recently the federal government has upped the wage subsidy from 10% to 75%. So was that figure from before or after all these measures were introduced?
Savannah?
Through you, Mr. Warden, it was right at the same time as were being reintroduced. Some of those announcements did come out before we closed it. We only closed the survey on April 9th. And the new survey that has gone out just started last week, and we're seeing the same findings in the results. What is interesting is that even though the programs have been announced, the full details still are not available because they haven't all been passed yet. I think until that happens, it's going to be a little bit of a waiting game, because we don't know, and we don't want to encourage our businesses to rely on these programs until they have all the information and until we know really truly what it looks like. So yesterday we had 3 different emails coming from somebody who is helping us get the information quicker, and all 3 emails were different, and all 3 emails had more and more and more information available, but they still, until everything is fully passed, it's difficult to say. But we are finding that even the second survey is very similar results wise to this, and we'll make sure that you do get those results.
Do you have a follow-up question, Councillor Desai?
Yes, I do, Mr. Warden. Thank you. The reason I asked is, and that was one of my points of interest, is whether if this was before those measures were announced, whether the numbers would be different after the announcement of the measures. And you're saying that they're not significantly different. And one of the concerns, I guess, I have with that figure is that it's in an ideal world, it's a great measure for the county to say no tax for the next 12 years for a business, but it's not practical, and it's not something we can deliver on. So I do have a concern with that number and sort of how we can work to reduce that number, I guess, of that, and what measures we can introduce. But again, I do realize we have very limited financial resources at our disposal. This one's more of a comment rather than a question, Mr. Warden. The one thing that we've come to realize through this pandemic is how important internet access and reliable, strong internet access is, not just in rural communities, but across Ontario. A lot of schooling now is being done online. And so I think as a rural municipality, we need to make a push, a stronger push to ensure that internet is considered or is accepted as a basic human necessity at this point. I know it sounds a bit of a first world problem, but we do live in a first world country, so we are going to have those problems. So yeah, I think that's it. We do need to push for better internet in rural areas. We had the deputy mayor of Temp Center sits on the public health board down there, and she was unable to participate in one of the meetings due to the fact that she didn't have reliable internet access. So I think not just from a government perspective, but also from a private sector perspective, if we are going to encourage people, and which I think it's going to be the new normal, as they're calling it, people being able to work from home a lot more often. So I think as a rural municipality, we do need to make that stronger push for accessible, reliable internet for everyone. Thank you.
I think I saw a for sale sign in your car, Councillor Desai, that you're no longer needing a car, right?
Can I?
Question back to you, Savannah. Do you have any follow up on that?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Internet, we know it is more important now than ever before, and we are strong advocates for making sure that we have good connection here. We are hearing that from our business community quite often, and that's one of the reasons why we ourselves haven't hosted any webinars for business training yet, because we are hearing that so many are struggling to connect because of their internet availability. So we have been sharing what others are doing, but we're trying to figure out what we can do to get PDFs or phone calls or those types of things in front of people so that they don't require a lot of bandwidth. But absolutely on the radar and will be part of those recovery plans and discussions.
And that's so important with the continuation of SWIFT and bringing that
Yes.
across Western Ontario for sure. And you'll have, and Savannah, you're going to have, when you bring out your next report, you're going to have an update from as time goes on, because we keep getting bombarded by information every day. And fortunately, from both the provincial and federal governments, they are stepping up to the plate with programs and stuff. So, it's just a matter of getting the interpretation through.
Absolutely. This is not the last you'll hear from me.
Well, thank you again for that. Are there any other questions?
Mr. Warden, I have Councillor Mackey, Robinson, and Potter.
Mackey, Robinson, and Packy. Okay,
And
go ahead, Councillor Mackey. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Warden, and thanks, Savannah, for all the efforts that you're putting towards our small businesses. I was just wondering, my question is in regards to the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. Do you know how many of our businesses are looking into that program, and how many jobs we might be able to save within Grey County because of it?
I will have a better idea by the time this next survey closes. That was one of the questions we asked, was what programs are people going after? And the other question we also asked is how many employees do you have now, and how many before, and how many employees do you have now, along with revenue questions in terms of what were your 2019 revenues and what's your 2020 expectation. So from this next survey, I will definitely be able to provide better insight into that. But from what we're seeing so far, it seems to be less than 50% of businesses. But I think part of that is because, again, we don't have all the information yet, especially around that program.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Warden, Savannah, thank you very much for the very detailed report and presentation as usual. Much appreciated. Under other business, I was going to bring forward the topic of efficient and reliable internet, as well as improved infrastructure for broadband. So I'm wondering if your next report, Savannah, will be covering all of this, or whether this is something that we should be looking towards SWIFT and getting a report in terms of how we can achieve improved broadband for Grey County. Certainly the pandemic has amplified the need for increased broadband. So I'm wondering if there's if there's an update from SWIFT and certainly from your perspective that we can hear that update and what challenges can we address to improve the situation for Grey County businesses and residents. Thank you.
So then I can maybe go to our Madam CEO or Councilor Hicks with regards to some comments on SWIFT, maybe, if you wish, Madam CEO.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. Apologies. I can let council know that I was bringing a report to the May 14th meeting. There's some work that County Council needs to approve in order for the next group of projects to move forward, which is ours. So I was bringing that. Berryfield is actually going to come and be part of our meeting at that time. So we can, if you all think of your good SWIFT questions, then we can pose them to Barry when he's with us on the 14th of May.
Okay, thank you, Madam CEO. And Deputy Warden, Councilor Hicks, do you have anything to add for being on the board of SWIFT?
No, nothing to add. Barry was originally scheduled, I believe, Kim, to come in April. That's now moved back to that May 14th meeting.
Okay, so as Madam CEO says, keep your questions or think about those questions that you need to ask and when he is presenting to us. Any other questions to Savannah's report?
Yes, Councillor Potter and Councillor Desai has a follow-up as well.
Okay, sorry about that, Councillor Potter.
It's okay, I'm easily forgotten. Actually, Councillor Desai addressed one of my questions, but I do want to echo that we need the internet and the broadband capability to expand, and we need it to happen swiftly. I was involved in meetings 10 years ago where we were talking about this, and it doesn't seem like we've gotten very far. So we need SWIFT to be swift and to get this happening now as soon as possible. Secondly, for Savannah, and maybe this is more a technical question, but I know it's a little bit cumbersome to try and find information from the federal and provincial and county and our local websites. And I wondered if we can encourage everybody to link to each other so that when I go to the county website, it will also tell me that there is more information available either on federal or provincial or local municipal websites. And I wondered if there's been any consideration of that.
So my phone's going off. Can you go ahead? I'm going to shut my mute off. Go ahead there, Savannah.
Sure. We, on our business resource page, we have created a single page, and that's where all of the links are going for every project that we're working on, every initiative, and every link back to information. So we have an entire section dedicated to federal and provincial links, trying to keep them in one spot. We found that the news areas for both the federal and provincial governments have seemed to be the best because that's where everything, oh, there we go, that's it. So those are the links that we currently have available, including plain language guides, because they haven't all been so plain language and easy to understand. So we're trying to keep that information there as well. And BDO has also been fabulous to put together really nice charts of information to help navigate these programs and supports. Whose screen are we viewing? Is this Rob's or Heather's? If whoever can arrow down a little bit.
It's Rob's.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, Rob. So we have, this is where we're keeping all of the important surveys and then resources by type for different sectors, for small business, for large business, and the business support lines there as well. The other component that we're looking to right now, and we're having a conversation with all of our member municipalities tomorrow through the working group, is what page do you want us to link back to you? So that we will have municipal links on here as well. I know Tim has shared some information from the Blue Mountains for us. So we now have his link because he's unavailable for the meeting tomorrow morning, but we are going to get all of that information and it will be finished and updated tomorrow so that we do have municipal links back as well. But we are trying to keep everything in one spot because it's a lot for businesses to try and navigate. It's a lot for us to try and navigate. So the less work we can cause for them, the better.
Okay, thanks, Savannah. And who was the next person on the list?
Councillor Desai.
Councillor Desai, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. First of all, I want to say, Councillor Potter, that was a great pun. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Through you, Mr. Warden, to Savannah, on the revenue numbers, were you meaning sort of this period last year and this period this year? Because I think it's going to be hard for businesses to project what the revenues in 2020 will be, mainly because, one, we don't know how long this is going to last, and we don't know when it's done, how long the recovery period will be. Speaking again from personal experience, what I can tell is that many businesses are in the same boat as my family businesses, and we've seen our April revenue compared to April 2019, April 2020. We're looking at about a reduction of 85% in revenue. So I know many businesses are in the same boat, and I don't know how long businesses will be able to sustain this for. And what worries me is no one can be quite sure of how long various levels of government can continue sustaining businesses that are seeing such revenue fall.
Well, thank you, Councillor Desai. And there's lots of upper tier governments talking about wanting to come out of this sooner than later, but we have to be careful, and we're not sure how that's going to roll out just as of yet. But thank you for that. Are there any other comments there with regards to this report from Savannah? And this was moved again by Councillor Carleton and second by Councillor Robinson. Any further comments, Madam Clerk?
No, nothing.
Okay, then I'm going to put it to vote. Any opposed? All right, that is carried. So moving on then on our agenda then to our next item for discussion is with regards to the tax policy from our Kevin Wepler with regards to our ratios. And I do have a mover and a seconder. I have Councillor Millen and seconded by Councillor Desai. Kevin, do you wish to speak to your report?
Yeah, I would just kind of walk through this a bit if council be so willing, just to kind of walk through the stages of it. Okay, so
the floor is yours.
Okay, so yeah, so the purpose of this report is to provide county council with the background and advice to enable the county to establish tax policies and how those policies affect Grey County and how it apportions its tax burden to the various property tax classes and as well to all the municipalities. In preparation of this report, we did meet back on March 5th with the local treasurers and staff group, and there was recommendations and items voiced by that group at that time. But since that time, the pandemic has come into place and emergency measures have come into place, so things have changed. So some of those things that were being recommended at that time or suggested, I don't think are appropriate now. So this report reflects a different environment than was being discussed at March 5th. On current value assessment, we impact updates property values every 4 years, and now that's had a bit of a change now that they've been announced due to the pandemic. But what we're working through right now for 2020 is the fourth year of the 2016 assessment values. So this is the fourth phase, and that's moving everybody to their CVA value, their final CVA value. So like I said, that's done every 4 years. So this is the fourth and final year. With that, when updating of values, there's using market values and the valuation methods impact provides, we get different shifts in property values, and that's based on different factors. And we're seeing, you'll have some properties seeing increases, some really not seeing much increase or decrease, and you have some decreasing, and that results in shifts in property tax. So on page 20 of the package of the committee reports, I show a table there showing the 2020 shift that's happening with the update in the CVA values. And you'll see the shift is mainly between the farm and the residential property class. So you're seeing the farm shifting to about $210,000 and shifting off of that about $201,000 from the residential class. Below that in the table is how that's impacted municipalities as well. And that just, again, this breaks up the the difference amount of these properties in different municipalities. Some have more farmland than others. So, but you do see how it does shift around. I did mention that the Ontario government has announced that for the 2020 assessment update that they had planned now has been delayed, and their for 2021 budgets then will be using the 2020 CVA values. And so everybody's CVA should remain constant unless you have changes to your property or there's appeals and values are changed, but it should give some stability in the 2021 budget year. We still don't know what base year they're going to do. When they were going to update for the 2021, it was a 2019 valuation date, but now that's up in the air. So we're not sure where that's headed, but what they have announced is for the 2021 year that we will be using those 2020 CVA values. Okay. Tax ratios. Tax ratios really determine how the property class, all these property classes compare to the residential class. So the residential class is a legislative ratio of 1. So if a property such as our commercial has 1.3, they're going to pay 1.3 more than a residential class would. So that's how those ratios work. So, and I have listed in the table on 21 what the county's 2019 ratios are. You'll see them there. And then as well in that is the limits. There is limits put on by the province of how you can adjust these, what they call the range of fairnesses and stuff. And so there is options each year for council to consider when it comes to ratios. You can maintain your current ratios. You can create a new ratio that's current or close to within the range of fairnesses, or utilize a restated revenue neutral transition ratio, which really just helps the residential class way it's prescribed in the legislation. So in regards to the farm tax rebate, this back in time, the province and the Ontario, they made changes to this. And at one time the farms were taxed with a ratio of 1 in essence, and then they applied for a rebate to the province, and the province then remitted this back. And that's how they recovered that rebate that they paid to the local municipalities. Through different programs and stuff, this now has ended up in being now that it's they're ratioed at 25 and is part of each municipalities. And so the cost of those rebates then rely within the municipality and aren't really shared province-wide. Okay. The Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund has components in there of grants that are to help those areas with large farm tax and stuff. I did go in and look through everyone's 2020 allocations that have been announced, and you'll see, they're getting support of about 11 million, but the farm rebates is about 13 million that's coming back. So it's not really revenue neutral, but I know what'll be argued there is that there's uploads of social services costs, but where those are helping as well is that more urban than it is rural? That's a debate. So the farm tax ratio, what I've tried to you'll see on page 24, that table there provides, you've heard this a couple of years now that those values for the farmlands were going up over 70% over the 4 years. And that is supposed to be, as MPAC says, is from sales of farmer to farmer. And that's what they're seeing in those sales values. And that's what those are based on. Okay. And so with that, with 2020 budget, we're seeing a shift, like I said, about that 210,000 shift onto the farm. Grey County Federation of Agriculture made a delegation to County Council back on February 27th. The Federation was requesting consideration be given to avoid further shifts in the property tax to the farm class in 2020. And they had stated to maintain the 2019 farm tax burden at 4.2%, the county would require a ratio of 0.218. Or if you wanted to go back to historical of 3%, it would require a ratio of 0.153. Just a comment on there, if we tried to keep everyone's taxes as historical, there'd be a lot of properties taxed very different in the county. So, But in saying that, I did then include in the report a farm tax racial sensitivity, and I've tried to illustrate what those various, if you did consider changing the ratio. For example, the first on table 7 is if you move from a 0.24 to a 0.23, you'd see a shift away from the farm of about $99,000. The 0.218 that the Federation had stated would be about $220,000. That's in table 8. And in table 9, if any consideration was given to 0.153, it would be about $880,000 shift off the farm. I then included on page 28, based on our 2020 revenue neutral tax rates and the status quo and ratios, some averages here just to put into context what we're talking about by property type. So in here you'll see based on an average single family home, 301, which is a detached not on water, average CVA is about $276,000. County tax, you're paying about $966. A farmhouse with a property code 211, that's about $193,000 CVA. County property tax, about $676. And then seasonal recreational dwelling looks as $493,000 for county tax, about $1,726. Then farmland in the farm tax class, average there about $522,000. It would be paying based on our current ratio of 0.24 of $439. Then a small retail commercial property, they're paying $1,277. And then a standard industrial property in that class of about $3,117. So I just wanted to kind of, the values are, everything has a methodology that are different. So that a farmhouse is not market value. It's based on construction value and then depreciated, where a single family home is based on market values of sales. So just looking at those averages, if you took the farmhouse and you add the farmland to it, you're looking at about $1,015 in county tax versus a single family home paying $966. So a difference of about $149. So just to put some perspective to these values, okay? I also then have moved in when we're talking to ratios. The next part is the multi-residential tax ratio. And this goes back in 2017, the province announced policy changes here where they created municipalities with multi-residential ratios in excess of 2. So paying double what a res class would be paying, the RT class, that they couldn't be more than 2, and they otherwise it'd be in a levy restriction. At that time, the County of Gray, our multi-res, and it still is a 1.44 for that multi-class. Back in 2010 and 11, there was the Housing and Planning Departments undertook a joint housing study and trying to address housing needs. And one of the recommendations coming out of that was to create a new multi-residential property class. And that was, and with a residential, with a new multi-res ratio of 1 equal to the residential ratio. And that was to encourage new builds of multi-res buildings and stuff. So it has stayed that way. And in discussion with the treasurers and stuff, this is one item that we feel is now as an inequity, that we're having buildings that it could have been really built a year apart of the same and housing the same individuals, and one's paying 44% more than the other. So it was something we thought should be addressed and phased in. So we've showed, how we could phase that in over 4 years. As well, we did a sensitivity on that and what that would look like moving it 10%. And again, that would take away from the multi-res class of about 127,000, move on to the residential of 106. So I'm looking at all these, and with the pandemic and what's going on with businesses and stuff, I recommended here that when it came to ratios, that we just adopt the 2019 year's actual tax ratios for use in setting the 2020 tax rates. So that's where I come up to on ratio. So I don't know if you want me to pause there for discussion, or what would you like,
Yeah.
Warden?
I think, yeah, we'll open it up for questions. Thank you very much for that report. Very, very in depth, and I appreciate the work that you do when you do write your reports. Very, very clear and descriptive. Is there any questions with regards to the report that's being presented from Mr. Repler? Is there any questions?
So Councillor Millen,
Okay.
his hand up.
Councillor Millen, I recognize you, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I would like to propose an amendment to the recommendation. Would you like that now before we're finished with the whole report, or do you want to consider that amendment now?
Well, I would prefer if there's any questions to the report first, but if there are none, I will recognize if you're willing. Just let me go around the table and see if there's any question to the report first, Councillor Millen, if that's okay. Are there any questions to the report in general? Okay, Councillor Millen, and then I'll if you're wanting to move
I'd like to move an amendment to consider the 0.218 tax ratio for farmland and the resulting changes in the other tax classes as well. I'm not sure how that wording goes, but I believe the clerk had a heads up, so she may have the actual wording that would be needed there.
Okay, so you're referring to almost like chart 2 that was recommended by the OFA as the 2.218 or okay. Do I have a seconder for the intention there?
I'd like to second that as Councillor Potter.
Councillor Potter, okay. Madam Clerk, do you have the wording toward that, Madam Clerk?
I think Tara has it, so she will read out the resolution.
Okay, go ahead, Tara.
The second clause of the motion be amended by reducing the farm tax ratio to 0.218.
218. Okay, some of them go 0.218 or 21.8. I guess it all depends on how you read it. So that's 0.218. Okay, is that correct, Councillor Millen? As you read it?
That's correct, and I'd like to speak to it if I might as well.
Okay, just hang on. And Councillor Potter, is that how you understand the amendment?
Yes.
Okay, so the floor is yours, Councillor Millen.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I think it's a matter of fairness. Standing still, the status quo will result in a large amount of new tax burden being placed on the farm tax class, and minimal increase on the other classes, because that tax has to go somewhere, of course. So it's not a matter of reducing the taxes on farmland, it's a matter of limiting the increase. Because if status quo, farmland tax burden is going to climb significantly, yet residential is actually going to decrease, as you will see in, I guess, I don't know what table it is now, but it's in Kevin's report.
Table 8. Table 8.
Table 8.
Yeah. Table 8.
Okay. Well, whatever table it is in. And I appreciate Kevin's report. It's always a very thorough report, and he does a great job of making a plebe like me understand it, or at least try to understand it. But the comment about, the times we're in now, COVID-19, a lot of uncertainty, it's the time to stay, keep the boat level. I agree with that comment, but keeping the boat level means keeping the taxes, the tax burden relatively level as well. And, the ag community is in tough, like a lot of businesses are. So I'm suggesting this is a way that we can show to our ag community that we are aware of the tax challenge that they're facing, and we can somewhat mitigate the rapid increase in the CVA by changing the tax class ratio to 0.218. So I'll leave it at that for now and see where the discussion goes. Thank you, Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Councillor Millen. Councillor Potter, do you wish to speak as a seconder?
Councillor Milne stated the case very well. The only thing I would add is that I think the increase to others would be minimal, but the most important thing of all would be that we would be showing some support to our agricultural sector, which I think at this time especially is going to be very deeply felt and needed.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Potter. And just before I go to questions to this amendment, Kevin, am I correct to say table 8 is the reference to the 0.218?
That's correct. That's correct.
Just want to make clarity there. Okay, so other questions to the amendment that is on the virtual floor?
So Mr. Warden, I think Councillor Woodbury had his hand raised.
Okay, sorry, but
and
okay.
Councillor Robinson and Mackey.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so Mackey and Robinson. Okay, so Councillor Woodbury, the floor is yours.
You know, I was going to second this, and Councillor Potter did that. I'm very much in support of us trying to keep the playing field financially level for the agricultural groups.
Okay, thank you for that. So then, Councillor Mackey, you're next. Councillor Mackey.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I certainly support the comments that were made by Councillor Millen. Our ag sector is in tough right now. Commodity prices are questionable. Certainly our beef prices are going down and probably will continue to go down with the way the slaughterhouses are being affected out in Alberta right now. I heard on the news this morning that 70% of the beef could be curtailed, I guess is the right word, if the other plant goes down. I recognize, that this is certainly a shift to residential, and I guess I have a question for Kevin. If we supported the 2.18, what would the shift be? Kevin mentioned that the average single residential property is assessed at $276,000. I'm just wondering what the dollar value, if that shift was supported at 2.18, what that shift would be. What would that $276,000 average single dwelling, what would their tax increase be?
So do you understand the question, Kevin? Because I think you're, okay, go ahead.
What I did some modeling with, like, say 300,000 as a base point for CVA values. And on that, on county tax, you'd be shifting, it'd be about a $4.08 to that residential property of $300,000. Okay. In saying that, it doesn't sound like a lot, but that's what I was trying to refer to, that table 10 on page 28, that the residential property already is paying almost $1,000, and that's already subsidizing the farm. So that's why I know it doesn't sound like significant $4, but it already is, when you look at that value, when you compare to a farm and a farmland. So if I may speak to Warden, I can understand the 0.218 and what's going on now in balancing. We had preliminary numbers on residential assessment trends for the next update of reassessment values, which were showing residential properties going up 40%. Would council be still willing then to, if the shift happens back to the residential class, would they be willing to move the farm tax ratio back up again then? And that's a concern I have with lowering this significantly. So those are thoughts I have here, okay?
Okay, Councillor Mackey, you still have the floor. Or do you have any?
I appreciate that. I mean, so that's just on the county taxes. So that, we'd have to add on, probably another, $10, let's say. So I'm guessing that the total increase for a $300,000 property would be around $15. Is that? close, Kevin?
So are you, just for clarity, Councillor Mackey, are you saying if you went to the 0.15, is that what your question is? Is what that would look like? Is that what?
The 0.18?
Yeah.
Go
ahead,
I'm
Kevin.
just concerned, I'm concerned, Mr. Warden, that, you know, I know there'll be a shift to residential, so I'm trying to find the balance. I was, you know, coming in today, I was thinking, you know, last year, County Council looked at a reduction of 0.1 down to 0.24. So I was all over supporting 0.23 based on, you know, another slow reduction, and then see where things are again next year. It would certainly send a message to our agricultural community that Grey County, you know, does support them, and you know, we want to continue to look at this every year. It's a larger increase than what I was originally thinking about supporting. So I'm just trying to get a sense of what the real numbers are to an individual residence.
Kevin, do you have any further comment there?
If I may, yes. I would say, Councillor Mackey, the county portion of the tax bill is probably about 40%, and then you have your education, and I would say your local municipalities range from 40 to 60%. So if the county is about $10, you're probably, your local municipalities are 12 or $14, maybe, depending. Okay, so you'd be looking at you know, $22, $24 on that, then on a $300,000 property.
Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Mackey and Kevin. Councillor Robinson, you're next on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and through you. First comment, and then I've got additional comments. I did raise my hand in the chat. I was hoping to be acknowledged as the seconder for this, but I'm absolutely pleased this motion is on the floor. I can't think of a better time than right now to support our hardworking farmers. And as you know, there's over 2,000 farms in Grey County, and a reduction of farm tax ratio would be an investment in Grey County as a whole. So I'm absolutely supportive of the motion. It would be appropriate and responsible reduction, which supports the investment in Grey County farming and acknowledges the agri-food sector as the #1 driver in the provincial economy. Recognizing we're in the current pandemic, but there's also market uncertainty, and also we need to support our farmers in Grey County. So I will be supporting this motion.
Okay, thank you.
That is 0.218, the motion that Councillor Milne is bringing forward. And thank you for bringing that forward.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Robinson.
Mr. Warden, I have Councillor Soever and Councillor Desai.
Okay, Councillor Soever, the floor is yours.
Yes, I'm happy to support this as well, even though our farmland isn't as big as some, but we do have a very significant apple growing industry here. And certainly, you know, I think the fundamental flaw is in the tax system, in that, you know, they're using market value to try to assess farms, when if that was a strip mall, it would be based on its revenue generating potential. And I think the fundamental problem is, you know, and that's why we're doing this every year, is because there's a flaw in the tax system, in that a farm is only as valuable as the money it can produce. But that being said, obviously there's value in the land, and I know I asked the farmer what we could do for farming, and he said, well, not for him, because he's just looking at his exit strategy as selling. So, you know, there is that aspect as well. So Kevin, you mentioned that residential assessments were going to go up by 40% next year. I'm just wondering, what is the average farmland assessment looking like for the new assessment cycle?
Thanks for that question. I sit on a municipal liaison group with Impact, and they provided us these residential trends, and at that time they had nothing for farmland yet. So I don't have anything. So I can't. It'd be very helpful if we had that. That's for sure.
Well, thank you.
Warden McQueen, you're on mute.
I have a clock that goes off here every so often. So I guess in a sense, having that 1 year deferral on the assessments, then that'll give us time to sort of see where those new values roll out, I presume, right?
Yeah, that's, now I guess there's, sorry to just jump in, but yes, and depending on, I guess what valuation date they're going to use, if they have to start over with a new valuation date of, of January 2020, or what are they going to use for the next update? And that's not clear yet.
Well, we'll be looking to you, Kevin, to update us because you're on that committee, right? So we'll look forward to that for sure. I think next I have Councillor Desai.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I agree with all the points that have been made so far, and I'd like to thank Councillor Milne for bringing this forward. The question that I do have, and I guess it's a question of procedure to the clerk through you, Mr. Warden. The CAO had forwarded us some correspondence that had come in from the municipality or township of Mapleton, where that particular municipality was writing to the provincial government in order to have them revisit the way the farm tax rebate is done. And if I can really quickly quote one of the areas of it, it basically, I can't find it right now, but it speaks to the fact that a strong agricultural economy in rural Ontario is beneficial not just to rural Ontario, but all of Ontario. And as such, realistically, and I don't want to call it a burden, but the responsibility rather of ensuring that our agricultural economy is successful and is looked after falls not just on rural Ontarians, but all Ontarians in general. So my question, again, Mr. Warden, through you to the clerk, is this: if we wanted to endorse that piece of correspondence that has come in from the Township of Mapleton, would it require a notice of motion, or is that something that can be brought up at the end of the motion that's on the table right now?
Madam Clerk, do you have a response, please?
Thank you. So right now we're dealing with the amendment brought on the floor by Councillor Millen about the decrease to 2.218 of the farm tax. To me, the correspondence from the municipality of Mapleton is germane to this discussion. And I think it would be appropriate that after we deal with the First Amendment, if somebody wishes to move support of the municipality or township of Mapleton, I apologize, then that would be more than appropriate to do so after we deal with the first one.
But, okay, just for clarity there, Madam Clerk. So if somebody was to move it after we deal with this amendment, would that be just sort of, if it was supported, would just be added into the report as information versus taking action? Because I sort of feel that probably the one from Township of Mapleton is more of a direct resolution to be supported, to be forwarded off to different level of governments. And I just wondered if it was a second amendment to this motion, would it be just added as information? Just clarity there.
It would depend on what the mover wishes to do. If it was support, then council could look at supporting that resolution and then providing its support back to Mapleton as well as the other agencies on the correspondence.
Okay, thank you for that, Claire. I'm just not sure if everyone has taken the time to see it, but we'll deal with that as a separate discussion. Right now, we're dealing with the amendment to lower it to 0.218. I think Councillor Millen, did you have a comment there, a question there? I thought something popped up there.
I do have Councillor Mackey as well.
Okay. So did Councillor Millen, did you indicate you wish to speak?
Yeah, I did. I didn't know where I was in the queue, but I will speak now. And Kevin's comment about the residential assessment climbing. Ironically, if it did climb, I think he said 40%, or whoever quoted that, that would solve a lot of our problem too, because then it would start to catch up with the dramatic increase in farmland. But nonetheless, here we are. And I appreciate that no one has any solid numbers on where farmland's going, but you know, there's the old saying that they're not making any more anymore. So I don't think there's any doubt that it will continue to climb. There will be a bit of maybe a bit of a blip or a decrease in the amount of increase due to COVID-19, but farmland will continue to climb. There's no doubt in my mind that it will. With the increase or with the improvement in hybrids and the demand of our population, good arable farmland will continue to increase in value. And I think we need to recognize that at the very least, it'll continue to climb at the same rate as residential, or even exceeding it in the future. But if residential does start to really climb, like the 40% or whatever was stated, then that will solve a lot of the problem too.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Millen, and I have Councillor Mackey.
Thank you, Warden. And I just wanted to follow up on what Councillor Desai was talking about. I certainly would second the Mapleton resolution. I do believe that, you know, when we're looking at these shifts, the shift should be shared across the province. And, you know, Toronto should be paying for some of this shift also, not just the residences of Grey County. So I think as Grey County, we need to be certainly supporting you know, this move, and I hope the Western Wardens, you know, get on board. And there's a real drive with this provincial government right now. I know this drive has taken place in the past, but it was with different government, and it may be well worth the effort, you know, to have delegations to really drive this point home. Because if we want growing in Ontario, then everyone in Ontario needs to support our agricultural community. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Councillor Mackey. I know that Kevin did speak a little bit to that in this report, and I'll look for upcoming maybe amendments to this motion. So right now we're dealing with the amendment of point 218. Are there any other comments?
Yes, Mr. Warden, we have Councillor Hicks and then Councillor O'Leary.
Okay, sorry about that, Madam Clerk. Councillor Hicks, you have the floor, and then Councillor O'Leary. Go ahead, Councillor Hicks, Deputy Warden.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I did read the Wellington report, and I think that the proposal therein with respect to Mapleton is an excellent idea. This burden should be shared by the entire province. I feel like we're having the same discussion we had a year ago, and the same arguments being raised. We went from 0.25 to 0.24, and I thought that you know, I didn't support it, but that was a reasonable gesture to the farm community. The suggestion that if we don't keep going down, that we are not supportive of our farm community is, in my view, nonsense. It does not equate to saying we don't appreciate farmers. We don't think that they're important to Grey County. They absolutely are. The question here, and I heard some people mention the COVID-19 environment as a justification for a further decrease. The COVID-19 environment is affecting everyone, not just farmers. And I appreciate that farmers have a strain, but so does everyone, including residential taxpayers. One of the responses that I've heard from the Ontario Agricultural Association is that they pay taxes too on a residential basis, that they pay taxes, a residential tax on their homes and 1 acre. And I have a question for Kevin. I know that he touched on this in his report, but I just wonder if you might flush that out a little bit more, because my understanding is that the rate of tax paid by the average residential homeowner is not the same, is not treated the same as the residential tax paid by a farmer. I wonder if he might comment on that.
Kevin, do you wish to comment on that portion of the question?
That's correct. Like, you don't have sales of a 1 acre farmhouse that they get sold with the farm. So the way they value, the methodology, impact values them is on a replacement cost less depreciation. It's not market value of sales to sales. So that's why you see those values on the average in the table, that single family home at 275 is an average and a farmhouse is 193, that they are different. They're a lot less, and that you're right. So they're not valued the same. And that's, they just don't, because you can't sell that 1 acre and that house by itself and get sales to sales comparison values. So this is how impact does it, is on a replacement cost less depreciation versus the market sales that are happening with the residential. And you can see the difference in taxes they're paid based on the average, and that's in that table 10.
So, Mr. Warden, to summarize, I'm not in favor of the amendment. I believe that what we did last year was reasonable, and we should leave it at status quo. I am in favor of the Mapleton proposal. That I think would be the better avenue for us to pursue, and it would shift the burden from rural communities to all of Ontario. Thank you.
Okay. Next is Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I'm not sure if Kevin mentioned it, but the other thing I want to mention too is the tax paid on a farm can be written off against the farmer's income, while the residentials can't. And I was looking into the literature that Kim sent out yesterday and from Hugh Simpson. One of the things he said in here is, at this time, when meat processing plants, supply chains, and markets are in turmoil, farmers are more squeezed now than ever. Just in our previous report from Savannah, we have over 10,000 businesses right in Grey County. Most of them, the doors are shut and they're closed. And I don't care if it's 5 cents we're going to add on to their taxes when they get home. I'm just not interested in doing that. I think now is the time to trust Kevin in what he's doing and saying. And I support what he is saying. So I'm certainly not going to vote for the motion that's on the table. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor O'Leary. Madam Clerk, is there anybody else wish to speak? Oh, I have Councillor Millen wishing to speak. Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
Yes, and I have the CAO with her hand up as well.
Okay, so I got Councillor Millen. I'll allow you, this is the third time, but I'll allow you because you're the mover of the motion. So go ahead, Councillor Millen, and then
I'll try to keep it brief. To respond to Mr. O'Leary, this is not a question of trusting Kevin or not trusting Kevin. I do trust his numbers. I've never doubted his numbers. What I'm suggesting here is, and it relates to what your comment about, I don't want to change a nickel of anybody's taxes because this isn't the time to do it. But if you stay the status quo, you are adding taxes to the farm properties, significant more taxes to the farm properties. As I said earlier, this is not a proposal to reduce taxes on farmland. This is a proposal to limit the increases to farm properties and let everyone share a little bit of an increase to reduce the taxes on farmland significantly. That's what this is for. It's not an attempt to penalize anybody. It's an attempt to make it fairer for everybody. That's where I'm at here on this one.
okay, thank you, Councillor Millen. I don't know if Councillor O'Leary, there was a question directed to you. I don't know if you wish to respond, just in fairness.
I see the video's off now. Did I scare him?
I don't know. I see he's left. Councillor O'Leary, do you wish to, I know it was a follow-up from your point. Do you wish to speak to that, Councillor O'Leary? I hear nothing. Okay, I think then next, Madam CAO, go ahead.
Thank you,
Madam
Mr. Warden. Just one point of clarification for council, if I may. The Mapleton resolution and Wellington County report were circulated by Mapleton to all of the municipalities in Ontario, and we had just received that, I guess, late on Tuesday, and I did want everyone to be able to see it yesterday, which is why I circulated it. I thought it was important for you to have that at the forefront as part of these discussions. It wasn't part of the agenda package. So I do apologize for anyone who's trying to follow along with this conversation from home or whatever, and might be wondering what the Mapleton resolution or information was about, because it wasn't part of the agenda package. And so while all municipalities have it, the public might not. So I do apologize for that.
And sort of my comments to you, Madam CEO, I was sort of thinking that it should be added to the next agenda, and then the public sees what we're talking about, and then we can all have the ability to have it open, but I'll leave it up to the county councilors that are on the floor. So right now we're dealing with—
If I may, Mr. Warden, that could be certainly completed. We could have that in an effort to be as transparent as possible. We could add it to the next agenda and put it on for consideration of council.
Yeah. It's that key of open.
Point of clarity, Mr.
Yes, your point of clarity, Councillor Desai.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. My point of clarity is through you to the clerk. If we were to move that motion on the Mapleton resolution today, could it be that so that it gets added to the minutes for next or when we approve the minutes, that's when it gets added, rather than having to wait for the next committee of the whole meeting and then having to wait for 2 meetings after that or a meeting after that to allow staff to get on with it.
So to your point of clarity, I don't see it's really directed toward the amendment that's here. I'm going to allow that point of clarity to be added to after we deal with this amendment, before we leave the section, just for the point of not to cloud this amendment that we have right now. I will come back to that point, Councillor Desai, if that's okay. That'll he's gone.
sorry, I was not.
Councillor Desai?
Yep, we can come back to it after we've voted on the current.
Okay, I appreciate it. I'm not trying to lose it. I just want to make sure that it's new information to the public, and I just want to make sure that we have that discussion before and I'll allow that after we deal with this amendment. Is there any other discussion with regards to the amendment that's on the original motion?
Mr. Warden, could the amendment be read, please?
Madam Clerk, can you read the amendment, please?
Deputy Clerk Warder will read the amendment.
That the second clause of the motion be amended by reducing the farm tax ratio to 0.218.
Okay. Does everybody understand the amendment? If there's any problem there, let's speak up. So, Madam Clerk, I've heard in favor and I've heard those that are opposed to this. So I might do a little different than sort of go to in favor and then go to oppose, and maybe just because I've heard both sides say there's in favor, different than just saying are any opposed. Is that okay, Madam Clerk, or how do you wish I proceed?
I see Councillor Soever's hands up, so I'm wondering if he has a solution to the voting.
Oh, okay. I will then recognize Councillor Soever. You have the floor.
I'd like a recorded vote, please, and that will cover everything.
Okay, there you go. That's right. Okay, Madam Clerk, the request has been made.
May I jump in here? Sorry.
Kevin?
Yes. Before you vote on this, there's other items in this report, and if you're happy with them, and you want to move forward with this vote, but there's other items in the tax policy report there that do you want to consider or have discussion on before, or are you still with the report?
So right now, Kevin, this is an amendment to the motion that's on the floor.
Right.
We will come back to the original motion with the amendment made, whether it is or it's supported or not. It'll still be on the floor, so you have an opportunity to speak.
Okay.
That is correct. So we are just voting on the amendment to change the farm tax ratio to 0.218.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can you do the duties, please?
I will. I'll read out each name. Please unmute your mic and let me know if you're in favor or against. Councillor Mackey.
In favor.
Councillor Gamble. Counselor Gamble,
Is he still on the screen there, Madam Clerk?
he's muted.
Okay, I can try to,
He's in favor, I believe.
well, we have to hear it
There he
from him.
Hello, yes, I'm in favor.
Thank you. Counselor Burley,
Against.
against?
Against.
Thank you. Counselor Carlton,
Opposed.
opposed? Warden McQueen,
In favor?
Counselor Desai,
In favor?
Counselor Patterson, Counselor Patterson, Counselor Patterson, Counselor Patterson,
Against.
thank you. Counselor Hicks,
Against.
Counselor Clumpus,
Against.
Counselor Keaveney,
In favor.
Counselor Body,
Opposed.
Counselor O'Leary,
Against.
Counselor Woodbury,
In favor?
Counselor Millen,
In favor?
Counselor Soever,
In favor.
Counselor Potter,
In favor.
Counselor Robinson,
In favor.
Counselor Hutchinson.
In favor.
I'm sorry, I'd just like to go back to Counselor Carlton and make sure that her vote was correct. Counselor Carlton, I have you as opposed.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. The motion is carried 51 to 39.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. So we have an amended motion on the floor, and before I go back to Kevin, is it okay with the resolution for Mapleton to be added to the next agenda for open and transparency for the public? Is that okay if we leave that for now?
If I may, Mr. Warden, to address Counselor Desai's concerns, we could add a clause at the end of that to say that staff proceed ahead of council approval so that staff can deal with that after next council meeting, should council support that resolution.
Okay, thank you for that, Madam Clerk.
If I may, Mr. Warden, I was going to say that provided we could add that clause to that, I'm more than happy to leave it to the next council meeting or the next.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you for that. It's you know, I think there's a lot of opportunity to have conversation around that, but I think it would be good to have the ability for the public to see it also. And I know, I think the Madam CEO said it came in late yesterday, I think she said, or Tuesday, maybe it wasn't. So, yeah. So Kevin, Mr. Ruppler, did you have anything to add to the amended motion with regards to your report or seeking other direction?
Just there's other items in the tax policy that I want to make sure that I cover off before you vote on the
Okay.
here. Okay.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Okay, I just finished just talking about ratios and the multi-residential tax ratio. Is there any discussion there that people would like to see that change? Right now, I'm recommended to keeping it the same as, and that's what I was doing exactly with the farm. So that's there for discussion as well.
Okay, so you're with regards, yeah, so is there any other thoughts on that from county councilors to change that, or we leave it the same as in the report? Anybody have any comments there?
I did see Counselor Desai raise his hand.
Counselor Desai, do you have a comment to that?
Thank you, Your Worship. My comment was more to the program options rather than the multi-residential rates. So I'll wait for anyone else who got specific questions to the multi-residential.
I don't think there's any other questions. Councillor Desai?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I'll go ahead. My question with regards to the program option of pursuing immediate opt-out or offering the rebates. And I'm not sure who to ask this question to, so I'll direct it to the CAO through you, Mr. Warden. One of the questions I have with regards to the rebate on the vacant properties is that if we were to in fact take away the that rebate, would that incentivize perhaps property owners who currently maintain vacant units to partake in the CIP, and through the CIP have a better unit to offer for rent, and then hopefully have that unit rented out rather than leaving it as a vacant unit, mainly because they don't want to spend the capital on improving that unit. Having said that, I do understand that we're right now in the middle of a global pandemic. So while I wouldn't necessarily move or suggest that we do that right away, I would maybe even suggest a phase-in option or a phase-out option rather. So I just wanted to get the CAO's thoughts on.
Good question, Madam CAO.
This is a question that's been batted back and forth since I was with the Ministry of Economic Development, 15 years ago. It has really been an ongoing discussion. Certainly, what we see is that there are people who have significant holdings in downtowns across the province who, for their own business reasons, were somewhat reluctant to rent those properties out, and that then has a spillover effect into the health and the vitality of those downtowns. There have been many people in the economic development field and municipal government officials who have felt that perhaps they were providing an advantage, a policy advantage, which really was working against their own best interests, which would be to see thriving and healthy businesses in those storefronts and properties. I think your second point, though, is well taken. That given Savannah's report early in our meeting today, it is not clear to us, the viability of these small businesses who would have been competing to have those spaces, whether those are going to be available to us in the short term. So for now, to just take a pause and work through that was where we came to with staff. But I think in the long term, what do you want to see? You want to see stores occupied, businesses busy and thriving in your communities.
Thank you, Madam CEO. Do you have a follow-up question, Councillor Desai?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Thank you for that response, Madam CEO. Mr. Warden, I'd like to move an amendment to that section of the main motion and say that we start phasing out of the rebate program starting next year. So the rebate program remains in place as it is for this year. We start phasing out next year, and I believe, I'd like to word the motion in a way that next year, if we find that we're still not fully recovered from the effects of the global pandemic, that we would have the option of pushing it further one more year as a way to leave that capital in the economy. You're on mute, Mr. Warden.
And my clock went off again. Darn clock. So you're looking at moving it then to look at phasing it out for 2021. Is that what you're, just for clarity?
Yes, Mr. Warden.
Okay, so does everybody understand, Jeff, roughly what the amendment motion that Councillor Desai is suggesting? Is there a seconder for that amended motion? Does somebody like to, is there a seconder to that?
I see Councillor Burley's hand.
Okay, Councillor Burley is seconding that. So Madam Clerk, can you properly sort of word that just so everybody understands then what the motion is being presented?
Tara's typing furiously.
Okay.
If there's any questions, give her just a minute. I see that Mr. Wepler has a couple of comments, so we'll
Okay.
through a resolution now.
Okay. Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to say procedurally, you've got to go through a process here first before you can make a motion like that. So what I mean by that, the province has laid out that you have to engage stakeholder engagement. You'd have to do a survey, listen to all those comments before then you could make that motion that you wanted. And we were prepared to do that. The treasurers wanted to do this, but I'm saying right now, to go out with a survey to businesses and the residents right now, I think that would be not very well received. So that's why I'm saying, let me bring this back at another time and we leave it as it is. But yeah, and then once you've done that in that stakeholder engagement, heard their comments and stuff, then that motion that you have, if you feel still is appropriate at that time, you would do that then, okay?
So just for clarity, Kevin, as you're saying, the process would be is you need to go out and do a process, but just don't necessarily say you're going to phase it out. You need to do that process just for clarity, right?
That's what the province mandated here, that you have to get comments first before you can make you can't just do this on your own. You have to, there's a process, okay?
So I'm going to go back to the mover of this motion. Councillor Desai, you heard the comments there. Your thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I'm wondering then if it would suffice if I changed the wording to staff initiate the process to look at reducing or to look at phasing out of the vacant unit rebate, if that would suffice. My second question on the same issue would be what is the difference between us changing the tax ratio on the farmland without having to do any of that consultation, and us not being able to do that with the vacant unit rebate? I'm just looking for the technical difference.
I'll allow the question for clarity. Kevin?
I can't answer why they don't ask us to, but other than, it's a public process we're going through every year with the policy report. They mandate annually we have to do tax policy, but this was specific on this. So I know the city of Owen Sound went through trying to do that because they have a separate tax policy. They did a survey of their residents and stuff before the motion was put forth. So yeah, this is a process that the government's given us.
Do you understand the explanation, Councillor Desai?
I understand the explanation. My question then still remains, would it suffice if the motion read that council directs staff to initiate that process?
Councillor Kevin, would that be sufficed to entertain that resolution?
I'm fine. Like, but at what point in time are you're asking me to do that? I guess and that's where I would sooner, just politically, I think it doesn't look at this time of a pandemic to state something. I'd rather let's see when recovery comes and then make a motion like that you ask us to go out. That's just my personal feelings on this.
So Kevin, I guess two parts is one is the mover withdraws the resolution, or secondly, if it is supported, you would bring back a report, and in your report, you would say that during the current situation, I would suggest we hold off to a certain time. So I guess there's two options that could happen there. So I'm going to go back to Councillor Desai. You've heard the Director of Finance and Corporate Services speak there. What's your thoughts again?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. The Director of Corporate and Finance Services did mention that, what the timelines would be. As I mentioned in the prologue to bringing the motion forward, I'm not looking to make those changes right now. These changes are something I'd like to see us phase. I'd like to see us phase out of the rebate program starting next year. And even at that point, if we look at it and we say, you know what, we still haven't fully recovered from the global pandemic, then we push it back further another year. So I'm not saying we do it right away. I'm not even trying to tie council into doing it next year itself. But if there is a process, and I think we should initiate that process. And I take very well the point on, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, but we do have to think beyond the global pandemic. And sometimes the only choices you have are the bad ones, but you still have to make a choice. We're in this job. We are supposed to make tough decisions. So I'd like to stick with the motion of, we initiate the process, and I'll leave it up to staff when they feel that it's a reasonable time to go out and get the information. Staff has more up-to-date data on where we are on the recovery process. So I'll leave that up to staff. Our job is to set policy. I don't want to tell staff how to do their job. I'm just proposing a policy change. Thank you.
So just for clarity on your motion, then, that you are then adding to it to initiate the process. Is that your wording change?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going back to Councillor Burley before I get Tara to totally rewrite this motion. Are you still supporting that resolution, Councillor Burley?
Very confusing, but at this time, I'm more inclined to follow the Director of Finance's recommendations, and so I'm going to withdraw my second.
Okay. Is there somebody wishes to second Councillor Desai's motion with the intent that he has put forth right now? Is there a seconder? Councillor Desai, I don't seem to be getting a seconder.
Fair enough.
My suggestion to you is you could raise this in 6 months, either through a notice of motion or whatever, if we move forward from this COVID-19 and things are looking different. There's no saying that you can't do that at a later date, but I'm not seeing a seconder at this time. Okay. So go ahead, Kevin. No problem. Kevin, do you have any?
Yeah, I just wanted something further to that. They have application dates, and I guess I should have put this in a report, but it's like April and August that they asked. So in order to do what you're saying for next year, you'd have to be doing this, in June and July. And I just don't think that timing would be very good for staff or council to be initiating something like that right at this point in time. So.
Okay, well, thank you for that information, Mr. Ruffler. Do you have anything else to the report?
Just in there was the options of the new agri-food business subclass. There's only been 13 properties that were identified by impact that are eligible. Due to the small few that are there, that it was decided or recommended that we wouldn't implement that subclass at this time. They thought there might be more disputes and more challenge about assessment with that. But I could be convinced in either way on this one. But this was what we had recommended, is just not to implement that at this time.
Okay. So would you need a motion to raise that part, Kevin?
No, it's just part of my motion there. So my main motion. Okay.
So Madam Clerk, I've seen a couple of things pop up my screen. Is there somebody who wishes to speak?
So I had Councillor Millen and Councillor Body. Councillor Millen has withdrawn his question. I'm not sure about Councillor Body. And I do have Councillor Robinson.
Okay, Councillor Body, do you wish to speak?
No, I can withdraw it. I just, it really doesn't look good with the business community that's having trouble paying rent, landlords that are having trouble collecting to start talking about that rebate at this moment, especially after we've just transferred some of the farm tax onto them. I just think it would have been bad if we'd moved forward with it, but that's, it's off the table now. So that's my only comment.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Body. Councillor Robinson?
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Warden, my hand was raised earlier to participate in the discussion. I too feel that it is not the appropriate time to look at that. And I would absolutely be supporting what our Director of Finance is putting forward right now. I think there is much more that we need to do on this, and certainly isn't the time to initiate that type of study or report and involve public consultation. Thank you.
I can, I've highlighted the.
Okay, I hear some background noise there, but I'm not sure. Madam Clerk, is there anybody else wish to speak?
No, I have nothing there. I was just checking with the deputy clerk to make sure the amended motion is ready to go.
Okay, so Kevin, is there anything else you wish to add to your report then?
Yeah, just a couple more. That there's the tax reductions for farmland waiting development subclasses, that we would continue with our historical practice there, that the type 1 with subdivision registered that continues to be farmed would be taxed at a farm rate of that tax ratio. And tax 4, where there's a building permit issued, it would go to the full class rate and be charged full tax. So that's no different. Optional classes of property, nothing's been brought to our attention on that. So like the only 2 we have are the resort condo and the new multi-res classes that have been established. And then the other is the business class tax capping, and that we would continue our historical practice there, that of moving and using all the tools that the province is giving us to move all those properties to their CVA value and pay their full CVA tax. So that's all I have in this report.
So before I go back to Tara with the amended motion, is there any comments from county councilors with those 3 items that the director has raised? Or any concerns? Okay, I see none. So I guess back to you, Madam Clerk, to Tara. You have an amended motion.
Tara is actually going to share her screen so that council members and the public can see the amended motion.
Okay. And this is originally moved by Millen and Potter. I'll ask them if they still support that. I guess that's on the floor.
So I've just highlighted the amendments that were made previously. They are now included in this main motion.
Okay, so I originally have, yes, Millen and Desai. Sorry, yes, you're right. Okay, does anybody have any questions to the amended motion before I take it to a vote? Anybody from county council have any comments? All right, seeing none, then I know it is amended. I will do my traditional, is there any opposed, unless somebody asks me differently? Okay, so no questions. Back to the floor then. Is anybody opposed to the amended motion with regards to FRCW 1020? Is anybody opposed? Madam Clerk, is there any indication there?
No, I don't see anything in the chat or the notes.
So that is carried. Okay, thank you. I'm going to suggest we take a little break. It's 12:30. What's the wish of everyone? I know we have an emergency meeting at 2 o'clock, Madam CAO. So can we take a 10-minute break? Does that allow everybody to grab a piece of toast or a tea or something and whatever you have to do? So, or do you want 15?
I'm okay with 10, Mr. Ward.
Okay.
10 is fine, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to suggest then we come back in 10 minutes. I'm going to say at 1:41. And I'll recess it right now at 12:31. So we'll come back in 10 minutes. Thank you.
I'm just gonna eat. I'm gonna eat this.
So I'm sort of, everybody coming back, Madam Clerk? There we are. All right. Do we, Madam Clerk, are we getting everybody coming back?
Sorry, I was talking, but I was on mute.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
That happens.
Challenges of virtual meeting. Yes, we have most people back. We certainly have quorum, so you're welcome to go right ahead.
Okay, and I think I said to come back at 12:41, but it's 12:44, so I've gave everybody an extra 3 minutes. All right, so we'll call this, I guess, Rob, are we on live?
You're good to go, Mr. Warden.
Okay, so we'll call this meeting back to order, and I'm going to say it's 12:45, and moving on then to our next report C, FRCW 1120 preliminary overview of financial impacts, and that's moved by Councillor Patterson and Councillor Robinson. Is Councillor Patterson? Yep, they're both here. So then I'm going to pass that over to Mr. Wepler. You wish to speak to that report?
Yes, thanks, Warden. Yeah, it's just, this is a very high level report that I've seen other municipalities starting to do. Waterloo was one of them. So I kind of simulated this after what they have done, trying to give council some ideas of some of the impacts here that the county is monitoring. So based on this COVID-19 pandemic outbreak. So just it's we've identified as like reduced income with the bank rates changing 1.5%. The potential for more tax write-offs and less supplementary tax. Our provincial offenses, the court being shut down, we've seen a drastic reduction in ticket volume, and with the court being closed, the revenue is less. We're not sure what's going to happen with our planning applications. Economic development, the Sydenham hub, it's under construction, but be very difficult to rent during this climate right now. Gray routes being closed, the admissions and revenues that we there have stopped, and their biggest period of times of revenue is the summer months with their camps and things like that. Ontario Social Services anticipate staff time once all these applications start happening more. Most of the costs with social services are 100% provincially funded, except for our Ontario Works administration, which is cost shared 50-50 with the province. Housing, I identified, and it's been mentioned before by Anne-Marie Shaw, and that we're eligible to receive $2.3 million for that social services relief fund to help those in poverty and stuff. And it's to follow the Community Homeless Prevention Initiative guidelines, that funding. So we're not sure. Again, we're gonna have to watch trends on their housing, how much of the rent gets paid from our tenants there and those individuals. Long-term care and paramedic services, there's lots more staff time, more supplies, cleaning supplies, personal protective equipment being bought and used. So, but long-term care, we have been received an announcement. Each home is going to receive $75,000 for COVID-19. So we're tracking the costs there. We haven't heard anything yet on paramedic services. Although they have sent out a survey on Monday asking what our March's expenses have been and what we are projecting by the end of the year. And they want that returned to us by tomorrow, that report. So transportation services, we've got a number of our tenders out there that some have been awarded and some are being awarded for work that we figure is critical. We've held back on some that we don't feel is as critical, and mainly to see and try to get a handle on what our impacts are here and maybe what we maybe need to hold off and just see what the environment's like in months. So they're just I've listed those ones that we've delayed right now, and we looked at those ones and how much in taxation is sitting there. So that's a placeholder that we're using to try to help with what we feel we're going to have as an operating deficits going on here in the county. So we're continuing to monitor our cash flow with, like I said, with the intent that we're going to not charge any interest on that June tax levy payment. So the lower tiers then really can defer making payments to the county till September. So, and all that's being looked at. So again, it's very high level, and it's early for us to quantify these, but we are working on them and paying attention to them. Okay.
Mr. Warden, you're on mute.
I had that stupid clock going off again. Sorry for that. Thanks, Kevin, for the report. And it keeps changing sometimes day to day, week to week. So it's hard to, have a level playing ground, but we know there's going to be some changes possibly coming there. So, and it depends how long it moves on. I think I have a question from Councillor Body. Do you have a question, Councillor Body?
Well, Kevin just answered it sort of, but do we have a contingency if we're not able to collect taxes? If people aren't able to pay it, like it's a lot more than just waiving interest. There's going to be some delay. There's going to be some cash flow. Do we have our line of credit set up in that case, et cetera? Thanks.
Kevin?
Yeah, I'll bring back something on this. I want to short-term borrowing. I'd like to bring something back to council. We do have a line with the bank right now of $6 million, but I would like to update that, just reaffirm it with council. That's something I'd like to bring back. We do have some investments coming due in June, and I'm sort of monitoring as well. So I might let those investments mature and use that to help to cash flow us through to September is what my thoughts are.
Okay. Is there anything else there, Councillor Body? Is that okay? Are there any other questions to this report or to the Director of Finance and Corporate Services? All right. Well, Kevin, keep up the good work, and I know it keeps changing, like I said. So, when are you looking at bringing back a further report? A month's time, or a couple months, or?
Yeah, well, if we're just, like I said, it just kind of started at that third week of March, and so we're just trying to get a handle on some of we're just getting some of the through now, and so we're trying to analyze those and seeing what we're seeing and over time, and a lot of the supply costs and stuff, we haven't even seen the final bills yet, so it's early. So yeah, I would think a couple of months probably before I can bring something back that's more quantitative. But
Right. Well, and from different levels of government, they're starting to talk about how we're maybe starting to flatten the curve and talking about the means of coming out of this, or the slow coming out of this. So there's going to be a lot of conversation in the next month on that part, I'm sure. And there was one mention there once from the Premier that maybe the long weekend in May, but then it was retracted. So I think it's early days on that part, but yeah, it keeps changing for sure.
It is hard to quantify when you don't know when that recovery period is going to start. That's where it's very, very tough here. So
yeah, I know, and who knows what is announced from both levels of government coming out of here too. There's so many variables, right?
Yes.
All right. So,
Mr. Warden, we have Councillor Robinson.
Councillor Robinson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I'm looking at page 41 of the agenda. This is with regard to the subheading Transportation and Public Safety, Transportation Services. You've identified that a tender had been released but is now canceled for the structure replacement of Grey Road 9. Following that, there are 3 other projects that the tenders were released but are now on delay. Why would the structure replacement for Grey Road 9 not fall in the category of delay rather than being canceled? It was approved by council in the budget. So would it not be more prudent just to put it in the category of delay rather than canceling it outright? Because we have not considered that at the council level. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Ruppler.
Pat Hoy's still on here. Maybe he could help with this one, but I think it was we didn't even have all the engineering done on this one yet. So it was one that we probably weren't even going to get done, but I'll let Pat speak if he's on.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Warden. Yeah, it was just one of those issues that with a structure like that, you'd have to order the structure. It was a precast, so you'd have to order it well in advance. Then we'd get the shop drawings back from the manufacturer. Then we'd have to, approve those shop drawings, get them looked at, probably by our consultant. We did that design ourselves, but we'd probably have a second set of eyes look at that. And it was just one of those things where by the time that project got rolling, and you have a narrow in-water window, you can't just keep dragging it on until November. So we just felt it was better to cancel it. We are, we want that project to be done, but it's the structure's in decent condition, not great condition, obviously, but it's no risk this year. So that's why we wanted to put it off.
Councillor Robinson, do you have a follow-up on that?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Mr. Warden. Well, my concern is that it was something that was approved by Grey County Council. There was some work that was being done because the tenders had been released as it relates in your report. You've identified that. But why would you not do additional work that is required for it and keep it in the category of delayed, but it's being worked on, rather than outright cancel it? That's my concern in terms of, you've got these other projects moving on. Why not continue on with this additional project that has merit for this year as well, in my opinion?
So maybe Director Hoy, do you have a comment follow on that, or?
Yeah, maybe I wasn't very clear. I guess with the other three jobs, if we decide, in mid-May that we still want to do them, there's time. With something like a structure where you have to get it precast and made months in advance, there's just not, you either have to, we would have had to put it a month ago, which what we originally did,
right,
or we'd have to delay it indefinitely. So that's kind of, it's just an indefinite delay for this year. It'll be in next year's budget, obviously, but that's kind of where we're at.
And you mentioned working in water, you only have so much window of opportunity when you're working around water, correct?
Yeah, typically, when you get to the fall, you have to be out of the water. So we can't just start in September, for example. So that's kind of one of the, whereas the other jobs, just road jobs, you can go a little later in the year. We just didn't have the ability to do that on that job.
Okay, Councillor Robinson, do you wish any further comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden. Well, in terms of it being already within the budget and then having it be considered again for next year, would it not make more sense, in my opinion, is to put it in the category of delayed rather than outright canceled? And then as we look at the 2021 budget, it would be a project that would already be ongoing for 2021.
Just before, I think for clarity, I think maybe delay means that they're going to review it maybe in May and come back to whether they go out depending on how COVID, but I think he's referring to that the bridge just won't have enough time this year. But Director Hoy, do you wish to follow up on that?
Yeah, I think those three jobs that Kevin's identified as delayed, it doesn't mean that the canceled is never, ever going to happen again. Like, but it is that they're delayed just for a few months and reevaluated is really what they are. So it's just, by that point, it's too late to put that one out. But I don't think we're canceling indefinitely. We're going to bring it back next year and put it on the budget. So however we want to say how we're delaying it, that's fine too, because we intend to do it next year. But
maybe the wording could say postpone to 2021 because of timing.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Is that something that could be rewritten there, or just amendment to that it's postponed to 2021 because of timing? Director Hoy?
Yeah, we'd be fine with that. Sure.
Okay, there we go.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for that clarity, Councillor Robinson and Director Hoy. Any other questions into the report from Mr. Wepler? Director Wepler? Okay, so that is moved by Councillor Patterson and Councillor Robinson. Seeing no other questions, are there any opposed? Hearing none, all that is carried. Okay. So then moving on to next item, that's with regards to item D, and this is with regards to a report TRCW 1120, and this is moved by Councillor Carleton and Councillor Desai, and it's on the floor. So Director Hoy, do you have any comments to that report?
Sure. So this is the report on page 43. There's a map of the structure on page 48. So it's a structure on Grey Road 13 near the 10th line in the town of Blue Mountains. So previously the bridge crew had noticed some concrete cracks on the structure. Now concrete all cracks. So sometimes the cracks mean something bad. Sometimes they don't mean anything. So just, you know, some wear and tear. So we got some additional consultants to look at the structure just because we were a little anxious about the location of the cracks and the type of cracking. They've both recommended at some point we'll probably have to do some sort of rehab on the structure. I see on the screen there on page 47, there's some small cracking there and it's pretty hard to spot really. So kudos to our bridge crew for spotting them. So both consultants kind of recommended that at some point you probably want to do maybe a fiber wrap, but not entirely sure exactly what that would entail as far as the scope. So my first question to kind of our structural guys, you know, was, well, if you could wrap it right now for 500, why do you want to monitor it for 100? You know, because we're basically monitoring it to try to figure out what we want to do when we want to do it. So I think Mark has answered the question pretty well on his paragraph on page 45. Basically, it's a way to manage risk, understanding the structure's behavior, tracking the internal strain and stress that may result in deformation of the structure. So to confirm the structural integrity, support the diagnosis in determining the cause and possible remedy of deficiencies. If the monitoring program produces findings of concern, the data can be used to develop remedial measures and verify the effectiveness of the measures. So we've done this before. We did this on a bridge in the Normanby-Bentinck town line that was recommended for replacement as per visual inspection. But once we put this monitoring on, which is basically fiber optic cables, and it kind of measures the deflection or the variation of the length of the cables. And when a truck goes over, it measures how much the bridge kind of deflects and how quickly it bounces back to the shape it's supposed to be in. When we did this with the structure earlier, it was on a replacement schedule. Now it's not even on our 10-year plan. So, you know, we realized the bridge was just a lot better than it looked. That's kind of where we're going with this. We want to put this additional monitoring on there. And it was with this same company who, as far as we know, is the only company that does that. So that's kind of why we would like to just monitor the structure a little more and figure out our next course of action.
Okay. Any further, thank you for that, Director Hoy. Any further questions? I guess in that concrete, Pat, there would be lots of rebar anyway, right? That gives it that strength.
Yeah, and through you, Mr. Warden, that is something that, like the one consultant specifically stated, that if the rebar hasn't rusted and is doing what it's supposed to be doing, there really shouldn't be too many issues. We can't really tell that from looking from the outside, whereas from the performance of the bridge, we can tell it. So that's another reason to get this done, yeah.
But from the deflection report, and if you see major deflection, then you know there's interior structural issues that's going to be monitored. So very good. Any further questions then to Patrick's report? All right. Any opposed to that motion? That motion is carried. Okay, so then the next one to you, Patrick, is with regards to Grey Road 9, and I have Councillor Hicks and Councillor Millen is seconding that motion for TRCW 1220 and award the RTF TS 0820 Grey Road rehabilitation. Patrick?
Yeah, this project is a shared project we're working on with Dufferin. We tendered it together. Worked on the tender together. They have their part, we have ours. So there's a map on page 52. You can see that there's the blue portion as shown is Dufferin's portion of their road. So they've got a schedule in the tender for that work. Then there's a portion that's shared on the town line that Gray and Dufferin share costs. So that's in there as another schedule. And then there's kind of the eastern portion of Grey Road 9, which is all gray. So this was deemed an essential project as the road condition is deteriorating quite quickly. And as far as dealing with our contractors, we've already been getting pandemic operations plans. We got Miller's this week from their job that they've been awarded. Basically, it's listing their new operating procedures during the pandemic. So how they're doing distancing, their equipment, like wipe down procedures, how guys get to work, you know, the way we probably the pre-construction meeting will be a video meeting, those types of things are all in the report. So the contractors are pretty aware that things have changed obviously, and they're doing everything they can to protect their workers too, but they are very keen on doing the work. So we got 3 bids on the project, pretty aggressive pricing. Very happy with the price of asphalt this year. It's the lowest we've seen in quite a while, for market and price of oil and everything, I guess. So we have 3 bids, Cox Construction being the lowest, and we worked with them before. We were happy with their work generally, and we're recommending them for approval. So we'll be awarding our portion, and then Dufferin will be awarding their portion of the work.
Right. And that's nice to see that it's under budget. And again, that goes back to Director Wepler in the sense of financing that could be the offside of COVID-19 too, right? So of just getting work and lower cost to asphalt costs. Any questions from County Councilor on that? Any questions to Patrick? All right, well, that's, I guess the question to you, Pat, they'll start putting signs up once this is awarded to inform the public and the motoring traffic that this is going to happen.
Yeah, and we're going to work with the contractors quite a bit on their windows of work. Like it's going to be a different year as far as deadlines and liquidated damages and stuff. We're all going to really have to work together to try to make sure the projects get done and get done correctly. But it's going to be a challenge, but the contractors are ready to go, and they're pretty anxious to get started.
The only area that might have concern with people is right in Badgerose, is a bit of a hamlet as far as people and people around as far as the hamlet. The rest of it is all basically rural roads, right? So
right. Yeah, and our original construction window was June 6th. So we're going to talk to the contractor a little more about that date, but that's when they could start if they wanted to.
Right. Okay. So seeing there's no other questions to the resolution, any opposed to that resolution? Hearing none, that's carried. Okay. So that takes care of all the reports. Madam Clerk, is there any other business to County Council?
Not that I'm aware of, Mr. Warden.
Any other business from County Councilors themselves? Okay, I see none. Any notices of motions? Any notice of motions?
I see Councillor Desai has his hand up.
Okay, I don't see that, but go ahead, Councillor Desai.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. At this point, at this time, I'd like to give notice of motion that I intend on bringing forward a motion at the next committee of the whole meeting that council endorses the resolution from the Township of Mapleton. Thank you.
Okay, well, okay. So there's no discussion on that part. Are there any other notice of motions to come forward? All right, I see none. So my last motion then I have here is a motion to adjourn, and that's moved by Councillor Burley and second by Councillor Robinson. Any opposed to that motion? Hearing none, that is carried. So thank you. Our meeting is adjourned. I want to thank everyone for attending today's County Council meeting through the virtual opportunities that we have, and from the general public for watching us, and certainly the ability now that we have for those that want to be delegates through virtual, we are doing that now too. So if you have any requirements or requests, please follow through our clerk's department on the next upcoming meetings. And again, be safe, everyone, and wash your hands. Anyway, goodbye, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye. See you later.
Bye. Have a good